All right, this is Michael here, and this is my screencast reflection on teaching writing thus far in English methods. I'm going to focus on some information in both the Gallagher and the Anderson texts that we've been using. Let's start off with Gallagher. In the early chapters of his book, he provides reasons why writing is taught and why writing is an important skill to learn in the classroom and to apply in other aspects of one's life. One thing that he talks about is writing helps us think better. Writing is a cognitive / consciousness helper. Those aren't his words, but those are my words because I'm trying to interpret him in my own ways. He kind of says that writing helps us better understand our own thoughts and mental and emotional patterns. So writing helps us clarify how we feel, untangle our thinking so it makes more sense, so it's more lucid. More realistic, perhaps. In the words of an old professor of mine, writing helps us expand our available realities. I think that's a pretty powerful phrase. Kind of speaks for itself, and I think at some point I could teach that to certain students, or to all my students. Writing helps us grapple with extreme, unspeakable feelings, trauma, grief, loss, confusion, bewilderment. I think it's absolutely true that writing can be very therapeutic in a lot of ways and sort of help us on journeys of healing and understanding. Moving on. Other reasons. Writing helps to fight oppression, and these are his exact words. And I think this is absolutely true. As someone who taught a pretty diverse classroom environment in Las Vegas, I know that a lot of my students came from very unprivileged backgrounds, very marginalized in terms of their identities. And I saw firsthand how literacy, critical thinking, rhetoric, and writing skills, and kind of honing those skills in the classroom kind of help them empower themselves, and I think it's very much true. Those aren't the most important things for empowerment, but they're good starts, and they can last a whole lifetime as well. Writing allows us to testify, to argue for or against, to advocate for, to ally with, and to mobilize our political capacities. I think that's absolutely correct. Writing helps us to be better citizens in every aspect of that word. Writing lets us visualize and verbalize the blueprints for better lives and communities. And this is particularly pertinent to what I'm doing now in this class, in my guide class, we're trying to sort of create a project where students design their own utopias. So this definitely plays into that. Gallagher also goes into some concrete strategies to teach writing in the classroom. These are a few of the ones that kind of stuck out to me. Some are more concrete than others. The writer's notebook, it's like a journal, but it's kind of more for reflecting on the writing process and tracking your progress as a writer. It encourages students to flex their writer's mind, to act like writers, and I put that in quotes because it's sort of a phrase about how in order to be a writer, you have to act like a writer. It's sort of performative logic in a sense. And these notebooks can help track and strengthen brainstorming, writing, editing, and revising adventures over the course of a unit or semester. Using writing to extend knowledge, another phrase of Gallagher's. By this, he means that this encourages students to grasp how writing and thinking are interwoven practices. So the more that you expand in one realm, the more you sort of improve your thinking, the depth and the reach of your thinking, then you expand your skills as a writer. Writing as conversation. I really thought this was some of the most interesting parts of this particular chapter on strategy and activities. This encourages students to use writing to interact with the cognitive processes of others, which can expose their minds to new ideas and new formulations. So the concrete example he uses is the students have a collaborative journal where certain passages are continued by other students, so on and so forth. It's all done anonymously, so you can sort of connect your own thinking with the thinking of other people. Moving into Anderson, some of the 10 things that jumped out to me and which I'm going to emphasize a lot in my lesson plan. Detail. I think detail is, to me, one of the most powerful tools in writing. What does that mean? It means being able to observe the worlds around you. You can't be detailed if you're not observant. noticing subtle things, noticing nuances, noticing and appreciating complexity and depth, and not being afraid of those things either, which of course takes time and practice. Using and learning precision economy, so being absolutely precise and using just the right amount of words, balancing out sort of description, understatement, and of course beauty, which I think is essential to any good writing. One of the other chapters that jumped out to me is the one on energy. All right, as someone who's studied poetry and loves poetry, this is particularly powerful to me, even though I'm not the most energetic this evening, possibly. But what does this mean? It means writing that inspires, invigorates, aggravates, causes sort of physical reactions. It's got music, it's got rhythm. I think a lot of students don't realize that writing can be musical. It energizes, enthuses the mind, the body, the soul, and the guts. I remember the first time I read Sylvia Plath's poetry, I was struck by just how physical and visceral her poetry was. It was almost like it was kind of a part of her body, you know. And writing that needs to be heard as well as read. So I think you really have to emphasize in the classroom the act of reading things aloud, listening to things that are read aloud, as well as reading them on the page. Last but not least, this is a lot of text here, so I'm not going to read this out loud, nor do I expect you all to read it. But this is an excerpt from a model text that I've used before. It's an essay on beauty, on what beauty means, depending on who's using the term. And it's by the science fiction writer Ursula K. Le Guin. And I've used this model text several times in classes, and a few times, frankly, it's almost made me cry by how moving it is. But she basically talks about how beauty as an idea has a lot of superficial connotations in our culture. And then she sort of proceeds to create a more nuanced, fuller vision of beauty based on the life of her mother, whose death she's reflecting upon. In this last paragraph here, I won't read it out loud, but you can read it. And there's a link here to a site that sort of condenses the essay in sort of chunks that you can use in the classroom. But this last paragraph is just, in terms of writing, in terms of cohesion, in terms of language, absolutely beautiful and true and moving. So great model text. Want to share that as the last part of my screencast. So feel free to take a look at her work. And that's it. Thanks so much. Have a great night.